It started on a quiet Tuesday morning in West Hollywood. The sun was soft and slow as it rose over the school on Magnolia Avenue. Parents were dropping off their children, teachers were holding the front doors open with warm smiles, and kids laughed as they rushed toward the building with backpacks bouncing on their backs. But then, car sped through the school zone. Not just speeding a little. It was fast. It was too fast. It was a black vintage Mustang. And it moved so suddenly through the 15 mph zone that one of the crossing guards dropped her sign in fear. A teacher yelled. A mother grabbed her child and pulled her back from the edge of the street. The sound of tires skidding across pavement sent a ripple of fear through the morning. Calm. People expected the driver to be some reckless teenager or someone texting and not paying attention, but when the Mustang came to a screeching stop and a police officer approached the window with a stern look, the world paused. The man behind the wheel was Keanu Reeves. People stared. The officer's eyebrows raised in disbelief. Keanu slowly stepped out of the car, calm but tense, wearing a simple black hoodie and worn jeans. He didn't argue, didn't make excuses. He just said four quiet words, "I'm sorry, I know." The officer, still doing his job, issued a citation. Speeding in a school zone. Court date scheduled for Friday. Rumors spread fast in Hollywood, but this was different. It wasn't about a scandal or a tabloid lie. It was about something strange. Why would Keanu Reeves, of all people, speed like that? Why there? Why then? The courtroom was packed on Friday morning. It was not a celebrity circus. There were no paparazzi, no cameras, no media buzz. But word had somehow spread. There was something different about this case. People came in quietly. Many locals who had heard whispers. Some had children who were nearly hit that day. Others came because they respected Keanu and couldn't believe what they'd heard. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. The judge, an older woman with silver hair tied tightly back, looked over her glasses at the man standing calmly in front of her. Keanu Reeves, actor, philanthropist, icon of kindness. She read the charge aloud. "Mr. Reeves, you are here today because you were cited for speeding through a school zone, recorded at 43 miles per hour. How do you plead?" The courtroom held its breath. Keanu looked down for a moment. When he looked up, his voice was low but clear. "Guilty, Your Honor, but I hope you'll allow me to explain why." The judge nodded once. "You may." He took a breath, then began. "The morning I was pulled over," he said, "I had just gotten a call from St. Vincent's Hospice." His voice was steady, but something behind his eyes shifted. Something quiet, something broken. I'd been visiting a young boy there. His name was Liam. He was 9. Mother had written me a letter a few weeks ago. She said her son was in his final days, and he loved my films, especially the ones where I helped people. He paused. She told me. All Liam wanted before he passed was to meet me, not for a picture, not for autographs. He just wanted to sit with me, maybe talk, maybe watch a movie together. The courtroom was silent, not a whisper, not a cough, not even a movement. I had planned to visit him. That Friday morning, I had a small gift with me, a first edition comic book he loved. It was sitting in the passenger seat. His voice dropped even lower. But the call that morning, it wasn't good news. It was from the nurse. She said he had taken a turn. And if I wanted to say goodbye, I had to come now, not in an hour, not in the afternoon. Now, he looked down again, then back at the judge. I panicked. I didn't think, I just drove. A long silence followed. Then Keanu added, "I wasn't thinking about the school zone. I wasn't thinking about the law. I was thinking about a boy who only had minutes left and a promise I'd made to not let him die alone." One of the mothers in the courtroom covered her mouth with her hand. A man near the back wiped his eyes. Even the officer who had pulled Keanu over sat with a different look now, not anger, but quiet reflection. Keanu continued. "When I arrived at the hospice, the nurses led me to his room. He was weak, barely awake, but when he saw me, he smiled. His voice cracked. He said, 'You came,' and then he reached for my hand." Keanu closed his eyes briefly, then opened. Then we sat together. I played his favorite movie on my phone. He couldn't watch much of it, but he listened. He held my hand. and a few minutes later he was gone. He looked at the judge once more. "I know I broke the law, Your Honor, and I'm willing to face the consequences, but I hope you'll understand why I did." The room remained frozen. No sound, no reaction, just silence. The judge looked down at her notes for a long moment. Her hands rested on the bench. Then she looked up again. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves," she said. "You may step back." Keanu nodded and returned to his seat quietly. Didn't smile, didn't seek sympathy. He just sat, shoulders slightly heavy, eyes calm, but distant. The judge turned to the courtroom. "This is a place of law," she said softly, "but also a place of humanity. What Mr. Reeves did was against the rules, but sometimes, in rare moments, we are reminded that life is not always black and white." She looked down again, then spoke clearly. "The fine will be paid, but no points will be added. No further action will be taken." She paused once more. "Court is adjourned." With that, she stood and walked quietly out of the courtroom, leaving behind a room full of people who had come expecting punishment, and walked away with something much deeper. Outside, a reporter approached Keanu as he stepped into the sunlight, but he raised his hand gently and said, "Please, no story, just let the boy be remembered." He walked away. Not as a star, not as a headline, just as a man. A man who kept his promise, even if it meant breaking the rules. And for many in that courtroom, he left something they wouldn't forget. Not his fame, not his movies, but his heart. It had only been 2 days since the courtroom fell silent, but what happened there was already starting to spread. No headlines, no official coverage, just whispers. First among the people who were present, then their families, then friends. And soon people across the city and even beyond were quietly asking each other, "Did you hear what Keanu did?" Most thought it was just a rumor. Others thought maybe it was exaggerated. But for those who had been there that morning, they didn't need news articles. They'd seen it with their own eyes, and the story felt too human to be fiction. Keanu returned home that Friday afternoon, and didn't speak to anyone. He fed his dog, took off his boots, made tea like he always did. He sat in the same old chair by the window that faced the back garden, where an orange tree was starting to bloom again. He sat in silence for hours. There was no relief. No guilt, no pride, just stillness. The boy's name stayed with him. Liam. Keanu kept hearing his voice, soft and tired, whispering, "You came." And that sentence echoed louder than any applause ever could. That night, he placed the unopened comic book, the one he meant to give Liam, on a shelf above the fireplace. He didn't touch it again by Monday morning. Something unexpected happened. A handwritten letter arrived at his front door. No return address. No signature. Just a single envelope, sealed tightly. His assistant had placed it beside the coffee mug, thinking it was fan mail. But when Keanu opened it, the very first line made his hands pause. "I was the nurse who made the call." His eyes widened, and he began reading slowly. "I was there when you arrived. I watched the way you knelt beside Liam and whispered to him like he was the only person in the world. I saw how he held your hand and refused to let go. What you did, it mattered. More than... You know, his mother hasn't stopped crying, but not from sadness, from peace. She said she never believed her little boy would pass away with a smile on his face, but he did. Thank you for keeping your promise. Thank you for choosing kindness over caution. I know it wasn't the right way legally, but morally, it was everything. There was no name at the end, just one line. Some rules are meant to be bent for love." Keanu placed the letter down gently. His throat tightened. For the first time in days, he closed his eyes and breathed deeply by the end of the week. The quiet wave that started in the courtroom had turned into something else. The story somehow reached a small online blog that covered acts of kindness around the world. The writer didn't use Keanu's name, didn't mention the city, didn't describe the courtroom, just a headline. "Man breaks law to keep a child's last wish." Judge chooses mercy, but people knew. They always knew. In the comments section, readers were writing, "I think this was Keanu. Did anyone else hear that rumor?" Sounds like something he'd do. He's always been like this. True or not, this made me cry today. Had a story. Had touched something deep in people, something they didn't realize they needed. That Friday, Keanu received another letter. This one had a return address. He opened it carefully. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. Inside was a folded sheet. A photograph fell out. The photo showed a little boy smiling weakly from a hospital bed. Beside him, a tall man knelt down, holding his hand with a soft expression on his face. Keanu stared at it. It was him, and it was Liam. The note read, "Dear Keanu, I'm Liam's mother. I didn't speak in court because I was too heartbroken, but I wanted you to know. You changed our lives. My son didn't get to grow up, but he got to feel what kindness looked like before he left. You showed him that even heroes from the screen could be heroes in real life. You could have ignored our letter. You could have sent a gift or called once, but you came. You showed up. Thank you for everything. For the smile you gave my son. For the peace you gave me. And for reminding the world what real compassion looks like." She had signed her name softly. Alina. Keanu folded the letter with care, placed it inside a small wooden box, and set the photo beside the comic book. His eyes lingered on it. He whispered. To himself, he smiled. The weeks passed, but something inside Keanu began to shift. It started with small things. He began driving through the same school zone each morning, this time slow, steady, respectful. He rolled down his window and waved to the crossing guards. One of them smiled back with a tear in her eye and said, "Thank you." He didn't answer. He just nodded. Then one morning, as he drove past again, saw something on the fence in front of the school. It was a banner, a long white one with red letters. It read, "In memory of Liam, be kind, be careful," and below it, a small message in blue paint. "Thank you to the man who kept his promise." Keanu pulled over and sat in his car, staring at it for several minutes. A few parents walking past noticed him and waved. He nodded again, quiet. Still, but inside, something deeper was blooming. Then came the unexpected phone call. It was from a woman named Meredith, head of a local nonprofit called Final Wishes Foundation, an organization that helped terminally ill children see their dreams come true. "Mr. Reeves," she said kindly, "I know this might be sudden, but we heard about Liam. We heard what you did. We'd like to speak with you." Keanu didn't know what to say, so he said the only thing that felt right. "I'll come." The meeting was small, quiet, respectful, no cameras, no press. Just a round table and a few dedicated people who had spent years working to bring joy to children in their final days. They didn't ask him for donations. They didn't ask him to be the face of their group. They just said, "Maybe you could. Sit with them. That's all. Just sit." Keanu took a moment, then nodded. "Yes," he said, "I can do that." The following weekend, Keanu visited his first child through the foundation. Her name was Emily. She was 6 years old. She loved robots and ballet. I thought Keanu Reeves was actually a real superhero. He brought her a small plush toy and sat. Beside her bed, they watched old cartoons. They didn't talk about sadness. They didn't mention illness. They just laughed. For 2 hours, they forgot the world. When he left, Emily's father hugged him at the door and whispered, "Thank you for making her feel like she matters." Keanu smiled for the first time in a long while. "She does," he replied. What had started as a courtroom apology was becoming something else, something larger. Keanu didn't speak about it to the public. He never told the media. He didn't post photos. He didn't want credit. But word traveled quietly. The man who once raced through a school zone in a moment of panic was now returning again and again. Not as a driver, but as a friend. A quiet visitor, eh? Promise-keeper, and in a world full of noise, his silence spoke louder than ever. Weeks had passed, but Keanu Reeves was not the same man who stood in that courtroom. Something had changed. Not on the outside, not in his clothes, not in his voice, but in the way he moved through the world. He no longer hurried through his days. He no longer walked with headphones in. He paused more often, listened more deeply, looked people in the eye, his time with Liam, and later with Emily. had broken something inside him. But in that brokenness, something more beautiful had quietly taken shape. He now visited the hospital every Sunday. He never told anyone. He simply walked in, asked the nurses if any child had requested a visit, and if no one had, he'd sit in the common area and read books out loud to whoever passed. Sometimes a child would roll their wheelchair over. Sometimes a nurse would sit beside him. Sometimes the room stayed empty, but he came anyway, because showing up meant everything. And then one morning, as he walked down the hallway of St. Vincent's, a soft voice called out behind him. Keanu turned. A woman stood there holding a clipboard. Her brown hair was tied back in a loose bun, her eyes tired but warm. He tilted his head slightly, unsure. She smiled slowly. You don't remember me, do you? He studied her face, and then clicked. Natalie, he whispered. She nodded. He hadn't seen her in nearly 15 years. They had met once on the set of a small film. She was a medical advisor then, quiet, smart, observant. They'd shared a few conversations between scenes, usually about philosophy, books, and once about grief. But she'd disappeared after the production wrapped. Now here she was in a nurse's uniform, holding a clipboard filled with patient names. What are you doing here? He asked gently. She smiled. I could ask you the same. He gave a soft shrug. Just visiting. Looked at him closely, not with the eyes of a fan, but with the eyes of someone who saw the truth behind the surface. It's because of Liam, isn't it? She asked. Keanu blinked. How did you... I was the nurse that day, she said quietly. Keanu stared at her. She nodded. I made the call. I led you into the room. I saw everything. The air felt still between them. Then she added, I never forgot what you did. They sat together later in the hospital garden. The sky was a soft gray, and the breeze was gentle. Birds sang above them as children played on a swing nearby. Natalie spoke first. You know, most people don't come back. Celebrities especially. You do one visit, maybe a quick photo, then they leave. But you kept coming. Keanu looked down at his hands. I couldn't not come, he said. I made a promise. Not just to Liam, but to myself. What kind of promise? She asked. He took a long pause that I'd stop running from grief and start walking toward it. Natalie didn't speak for a moment. Then softly, I wish more people thought like that. They kept talking, not like old friends, not like strangers, but like two people who had each carried something heavy, and for the first time in a long time, didn't have to carry it alone. Natalie had stories, not the kind that made headlines, but the kind that stayed in your soul. Stories of children who laughed through pain, of parents who whispered lullabies while their hearts broke, of moments when goodbye came too soon and love came too late. But Keanu listened to every word. He didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix anything. He just listened, and when Natalie grew quiet, he reached out and gently placed his hand over hers. No words, just kindness. After that, they started seeing each other more often. Not in a romantic way, not yet, but in the way to people begin to orbit each other, slowly, respectfully, gently. Sometimes they walked the hospital hallways together. Sometimes they sat in silence with a child who didn't have long. Sometimes they just had coffee on the back steps and watched the world move on. But together, what afternoon? After a visit, Natalie turned to Keanu and asked a question he didn't expect. Have you ever thought about starting something? He looked confused. Starting what? A foundation, she said. Something in Liam's name, or in the name of children like him. A place where more kids can have their last wishes fulfilled. Not just through big charities, but through real people. Keanu's eyes widened. I don't want it to be about me, he said quickly. Natalie smiled. It won't be. It'll be about them. He looked away, thinking deeply. I don't know how, he admitted. You don't have to know how, she said. You just have to care. Keanu looked into her eyes and saw something he hadn't seen in a long time. Not hope, not expectation, but belief. Someone who believed he could help heal something bigger than himself. And in that moment, he whispered, okay. By the end of that month, the first pieces began to move. Not loudly, not on social media, just quietly. Behind closed doors, Keanu called a friend, a lawyer who had worked with him for years. They sat in a small office, sipping tea instead of coffee, talking not about contracts or movies, but about how to build something that could live longer than fame. They named it Liam's Light. It wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. Its mission was simple: to find children with terminal conditions, listen to their dreams, and make them real, not with cameras or publicity, but with presence, love, and dignity. Keanu's only rule was this: we show up. In person. Even if it's just to sit in silence. The lawyer nodded. Done. The first child they reached was a girl named Maya. She didn't want to go to Disneyland. She didn't want a fancy toy. She wanted to feed the ducks at Echo Park one last time with someone who would hold her hand and not ask questions. Keanu came. Alone, he brought a small bag of bread and a pair of sunglasses. Maya was quiet, but when the ducks swam over and started quacking, she giggled. And when she looked up at Keanu, she whispered, "Thank you." He held her hand until the sun began to set, and when it was time to go, he carried her gently back to the car, wrapped in a soft blanket. No pictures, no crowds, just one memory made real. But not everyone understood. Not everyone believed. Soon someone leaked the original courtroom story to a news outlet with full names. Suddenly, headlines popped up everywhere. Keanu Reeves broke the law to honor dying boys. Wish judge spares Keanu after emotional testimony. Was it right? Celebrity speeds through school zone, but reason leaves world in tears. The story went viral overnight, and that was when everything changed again. Some praised him, others criticized him. They said, "You can't break the law just because you're famous." They said, "What if he had hit someone?" They said, "Rules are rules," and Keanu stayed silent. He didn't post a statement. He didn't argue. He didn't defend. He just kept visiting children, quietly, kindly, without needing to be understood, because deep down, he knew not everyone would see the full story, and that was okay, because the ones who needed to see it already had. At first, Keanu tried to ignore the noise. He didn't care about headlines. He didn't care about the gossip. He only cared about the children. But something about this storm felt different. It wasn't just one article. It was everywhere. Morning, news, talk shows, podcasts, radio. Everyone had an opinion. They played clips from old movies. They dug up unrelated stories. They brought in legal experts to debate what the judge should have done. Some hosts praised him. Some called him reckless. But the ones that hurt most were the ones that called him fake. He's doing it for attention. This is just another Hollywood stunt. He broke the law and used a dying child as an excuse. Keanu didn't respond. Because deep down, not because they hated him, but because they didn't understand. Natalie found him on the rooftop of the hospital late one night. He was sitting on the cold concrete floor, arms resting on his knees, face buried in his hands. She didn't say anything. At first, she just sat beside him and waited. After a while, Keanu finally spoke. Maybe they're right. Natalie turned to him, surprised. Right about what? Maybe I shouldn't have done it, he said quietly. Maybe I should have waited, followed the rules. Maybe I messed it all up. Natalie looked at him, really looked at him. You think Liam would have agreed? Keanu didn't answer. Natalie leaned forward. Do you think he would have wanted you to stay in your car and miss that moment? Silence. Then Keanu whispered no. She nodded. Then don't let people who weren't there tell you what that moment meant. He turned to her, his eyes tired but open. Then why does it still feel like I failed? Her voice softened. Because you care. People who care always feel it deeper. Keanu didn't reply, but a single tear rolled down his cheek. Natalie gently reached over and wiped it away. You didn't fail, Keanu, she said. You showed up when it mattered. That will always matter more than the noise. But the noise didn't stop. 3 days later, someone posted a clip of the courtroom testimony, a shaky phone recording, not official. It's probably filmed by someone in the back row, but the audio was clear. Keanu's voice saying, I wasn't thinking about the school zone. I was thinking about a boy who only had minutes left. The clip exploded online. Some called it raw. Others called it irresponsible. The hashtags began trending. #Keanu lawbreaker. #courtroom compassion. #celebrity privilege. The foundation's azored. Inbox was flooded. Some sent donations. Others sent threats. Keanu's team advised him to go quiet. Take a break, they said. Let it pass. Didn't want to run? Not again. Not now. Instead, he did something unexpected. He wrote a letter. Not a press release. Not a legal statement. Just a simple handwritten letter. He posted it quietly on the foundation's website. No photos, no signature, just his words. I did not intend to break the law. I was scared. I was trying to keep a promise to a boy who didn't have much time left. I will accept all consequences for that choice. But I will never regret keeping that promise. I didn't want this story to be about me. I wanted it to be about him, about what kindness can look like when we show up for one another. Thank you for reminding me that doing the right thing doesn't always mean being understood. Within hours, the site crashed from traffic, and within days, the tone began to shift. A teacher from the school Liam used to attend wrote an open letter. She shared it on a local forum. I was there that morning. My student almost stepped into the street when your car came through. I was terrified. I was angry, and I'm still not okay with how fast you were going. But then I read about Liam, and about what you did for him. And I realized sometimes fear and love arrive at the same door, and it takes time to open it. I forgive you. And more importantly, I thank you. That post was shared over 5 million times, and one by one people began to speak with softer voices. But just as the pressure began to fade, Natalie disappeared. Not entirely, but for a week, she didn't answer messages. Didn't show up to work. Didn't meet Keanu at the coffee bench like always at first. Thought she was busy. But by day 4, Ori grew in his chest like a knot. He called, nothing. He texted, nothing. Finally, he drove to her apartment and knocked. No answer. He waited. Another day then, late that night, his phone buzzed. A message from Natalie. I need to tell you something. Met me where we sat after Liam passed. Keanu drove without thinking. The hospital garden was dark and empty. She sat on the same bench beneath the old olive tree. Her hands shaking, her eyes red. He rushed to her. What happened? Natalie looked down, unable to meet his eyes. I didn't tell you everything, she whispered. Keanu sat beside her slowly. Tell me now. And what she said next broke the air between them. My daughter, she said softly. Her name was Lily. Keanu froze. Natalie took a deep breath, her voice trembling. She died 4 years ago. Same hospital, same floor. Cancer. She was 7. Keanu reached for her hand, but she gently pulled away. I was the nurse. I tried everything. I stayed with her, read to her, sang to her. Her voice cracked, but no one came. Her father had left years before. The rest of my family, they couldn't handle it. A long pause. I sat alone with her the night she passed. Just me and her, holding her hand. Tears streamed down her cheeks. And the whole time, all I kept thinking was, she shouldn't be alone. Keanu's heart ached. You never told anyone? He asked softly. I couldn't, she whispered. I buried it. Became a nurse. Tried to help other children, hoping it would make up for what I couldn't change. He placed his hand gently on her shoulder. Natalie, he said, you did more than anyone could. Lily knew you were there. She knew you loved her. Natalie shook her head. I needed someone like you back then. Someone to sit with us. Someone to remind me I wasn't failing. Keanu's voice dropped to a whisper. I wish I had known. Then she looked into his eyes. That's why I pushed you to keep coming. Back, not just for the kids, but because you reminded me of something I thought I lost. What's that? He asked. She smiled faintly through her tears. Hope. They sat in silence for a long time. Not the kind of silence that hurts. The kind that heals. And when Keanu finally stood up, Didn't say anything dramatic. He just offered his hand. Natalie hesitated, then slowly reached out and took it. And for the first time, the next morning, Keanu woke up with a decision already made in his heart. It wasn't something he planned. It wasn't written in a script. But something about that night with Natalie, hearing her truth, holding her hand, witnessing her grief, had awakened a quiet fire inside him. He couldn't keep going the way he was. Not halfway, not part-time. Not only on Sundays. This work, these children, these final moments, these promises, it needed more than visits and letters. It needed everything. That afternoon, Keanu called his agent. "I'm stepping back," he said. "From what?" The agent asked, confused. "From acting? For now? For a while? Maybe longer." The line went silent. Then came the questions. Why now? What about the offers? You've got 3 directors waiting. This could hurt your career. Keanu, but he already knew the answer. "What I'm doing now matters more," he said. The agent sighed. "Are you sure?" Keanu closed his eyes, thinking of Liam, of Maya, of Lily, as he said, "This is where I'm needed." And that was that. The news broke 2 days later. Keanu Reeves steps away from Hollywood, focuses full-time on Foundation for Terminally Ill Children. It was not a flashy headline, but it echoed loudly, because people had seen celebrities retire before, but never for this reason. Some were shocked, some were inspired, a few rolled their eyes, but most felt something shift, because in a world full of fame and noise, someone had chosen silence and kindness instead, and that felt rare. Almost holy. Meanwhile, Liam's light grew faster than anyone expected. Letters poured in from across the country. Families, hospitals, even other actors offering quiet support. Keanu refused large events, refused photo ops, refused sponsors who wanted their logo stamped across the children's faces. He only said one thing: "This will never be about us. It will always be about them." And so it stayed simple. A child, a wish. A moment, then one evening, a new letter arrived. It was handwritten. The envelope was faded, the ink a little smudged, but the name on the top stopped Keanu cold. Marcus Hayden. He hadn't heard that name in over 20 years. Marcus had been a stunt double on one of his early films. A strong, joyful man who had taken a serious fall during filming and suffered permanent damage to his spine. Keanu remembered it clearly: the guilt, the pain, the hospital visits. They had lost touch not long after. With shaking hands, he opened. "The letter, dear Keanu. I don't know if you remember me. I hope you do. I'm writing on behalf of my daughter Lena. She's 11, and she's dying. She asked for one thing before she goes to meet the man her dad used to talk about with so much love. She said if he helped you walk again, maybe he can help me smile again." Keanu sat back, eyes burning. The letter continued, "I don't know what happened to you, but someone showed me a video clip of your courtroom moment. And suddenly, I knew you were still the same guy, so I'm asking one last time, would you come see my girl?" There was no hesitation. Keanu whispered out loud, "Yes, of course." The drive to the small town where Marcus now lived was quiet and long. When Keanu arrived, he found the house modest. A worn front porch, wind chimes hanging, small rose bush near the window. Marcus stood at the door, older, thinner, walking. With a cane but a smile, was still the same. They hugged, no words at first, just years of memory pressed into one quiet moment. Then Marcus spoke. "She's inside. She doesn't know you're here yet." Keanu nodded. "Let's surprise her." Lena was curled up in bed, reading a book about space. She wore thick glasses and had small patches of hair left, but her spirit glowed like the stars in the story she held when Keanu stepped in. She looked up slowly, then froze. Her eyes went wide. "No way," she whispered. Keanu smiled softly and knelt beside her bed. "Hi, Lena," he said. "I'm Keanu. Your dad said you were looking for someone to make you smile." She stared at him, mouth open, but, "You're him." He tilted his head. "Him who?" "The guy from the movies. The guy from the courtroom." The guy who made my dad cry in a good way. Keanu laughed gently. I'm just a guy who brought snacks and a board game. Her eyes lit up. You brought Uno? Even better, he said. Uno with glitter cards. She giggled. Okay, that's cool. They played for an hour. She beat him 3 times. He faked being upset. She pretended to be. A champion. They told stories. He asked about her dreams. She told him she wanted to be an astronaut. Even just for 1 minute, then that's what we'll do, he said. What? She blinked. We're going to space. 2 days later, with help from the Foundation, Lena was inside a real NASA simulator in a nearby city. They had arranged a private tour dressed in a tiny astronaut suit. She sat beside Keanu in a fake spacecraft while lights blinked and sounds played all around them. She looked at him with wonder in her eyes. Am I really flying? He nodded. You're already in the stars. She reached for his hand and held it tightly. Thank you, she whispered. He didn't answer. He just squeezed back because sometimes silence says more than words. When they returned home that night, Lena was tired but peaceful. As Marcus walked Keanu to the door, placed a hand on his shoulder. You gave her everything, he said. Keanu shook his head. No, she gave it to me. Marcus smiled faintly. You haven't changed. Keanu looked down. I have, but not all change is bad. They hugged again. This time longer. This time heavier. And when Keanu drove away, he felt something lift from his chest, not because he had done enough, but because maybe, for once, he was exactly where he was meant to be. But just as the night quieted, the phone rang again. It was Natalie. Her voice was shaking. Keanu, something's happened. He froze. What is it? It's one of the kids, she said. It's Emily, the girl you met on your first hospital visit. His heart sank. She asked for you. He didn't wait, didn't grab anything. He just ran to the car and drove faster than he had since that morning with Liam. But this time, there was no courtroom this time. It was only time itself. And he prayed that he wouldn't be too late. Keanu raced through the empty streets. It was just past midnight. The city lights blurred past the windshield as he gripped the wheel, heart pounding, eyes focused. Every second felt heavier than the last. He didn't turn on music, didn't call anyone, didn't pray out loud. He just kept whispering one name. Emily. Emily. Hold on. He remembered her tiny hands, her quiet laugh, her voice saying, You make me feel safe. He hadn't seen her in weeks. He thought she was doing better. But Natalie's voice on the phone said everything. She doesn't have long. By the time he reached the hospital, the nurses were waiting. They didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. They just pointed toward room 307. Keanu walked quickly. Quietly, the hallway felt colder than usual. When he entered the room, he saw Natalie sitting at the bedside, gently brushing Emily's hair with her fingers. The little girl looked pale, her eyes half closed, but when Keanu stepped in, she opened them, barely, and smiled. You came, she whispered. He knelt beside her. Of course I did. She blinked slowly. I was scared you wouldn't make it. I'm here now, he said. And I'm not going anywhere. Placed a blanket over Emily's feet and quietly stepped back. Keanu held her hand. Remember the story we started? He asked. Emily nodded faintly. The one about the girl and the moon? Yeah, she breathed. Did they find each other? Keanu smiled. They did, he whispered. The moon waited, and when the girl finally got there, he lit up the whole sky just for her. Emily's lip trembled. Can you finish it for me? He nodded, his voice soft and slow. The girl sat with the moon. And even though her journey had been long and hard and lonely, she knew she was finally home, because sometimes the brightest places are the ones we carry inside us. A tear rolled down Emily's cheek. I like that ending, she whispered. Keanu kissed her hand, and then she closed her eyes, her small fingers relaxed in his palm, and for the second time in his life, Keanu felt a soul leave with peace. Not in fear, not in pain, but in love. The funeral was private, just family. a few nurses, and Keanu standing at the back, silent. He didn't want to speak, but Emily's parents insisted, so he stepped forward. Hands folded, voice calm but heavy. "Emily changed my life," he said. "Not by doing something big, not by saying something loud, but by being present, by being kind, by reminding me that even the shortest lives can carry the biggest hearts." He paused. She didn't ask for much, just time and presence. And for someone to believe in her smile. He looked out at the small group gathered. "I believe in it still." After the service, Emily's mother handed him a small envelope. Inside was a drawing, 2 figures, one tall, one small, sitting on a crescent moon, and above them, in shaky handwriting, "Thank you for bringing me to the stars." He didn't. Cried not there, but when he got home that night. He placed the drawing beside Liam's comic book and Lena's photo, and finally let the tears fall. The foundation grew slowly after that, not because of fame, not because of money, but because word had spread quietly, respectfully, about the man who showed up, the man who stayed, the man who didn't speak for the cameras, but listened for the heartbeats. More letters came from teachers, from parents, from children who just wanted to be heard. Keanu answered every one, some by hand, some by phone, some by simply showing up at the front door, not as a star, not as a hero, but as someone who kept his promises. Natalie stayed by his side through it all. Sometimes they were just friends. Sometimes they held each other when the days got too heavy. And sometimes they just sat in silence, listening to the wind and remembering the names of children whose faces had faded, but whose love still lingered. And though they never used the word love between them, it existed gently, patiently, in the spaces between their quiet moments. One year after Emily's passing, the school she once attended held a small ceremony. They had built a bench in the garden. It had no plaque, no fancy message, just a soft engraving, "For the ones who made us kinder." Keanu attended. He didn't speak. He just sat on the bench, hands in his lap, as the children played nearby. A little girl ran up to him and asked, "Are you the movie man?" He smiled. "Maybe." She giggled and ran away. He looked up at the sky, where clouds floated like soft memories. And for the first time in a long time, he felt peace. In the end, the world slowly stopped asking about the courtroom. They forgot the headlines, forgot the hashtags, they forgot the debates. But what they remembered was the silence. The moment when a man stood before a judge and told the truth with nothing but love in his voice. The moment when that courtroom stopped breathing, not out of shock, but because they had witnessed something pure. They remembered the way one mistake led to something far greater, a reminder that even broken roads can lead to beautiful destinations. Keanu never returned to Hollywood in the same way. He acted again years later in one small film about hope, but it was never about fame anymore. It was never about him, because he had learned that the most powerful stories are the ones that never make it to the screen. They live in hospital rooms, in final wishes, in drawings left behind, in the small, quiet moments no one sees. He never forgot Liam or Lena, or Emily or Lily, and he carried their light with him wherever he went, not as a burden, but as a promise to always show up, because sometimes showing up is the bravest thing we can ever do.